Alex woke up to the sound of birds singing outside his window. The morning light was soft and golden, slipping through the curtains and painting warm shapes on the floor. He yawned and stretched his arms high above his head. The blankets felt cozy and soft around him, and he felt the comfort of his own home. Mornings were always easy. He could get up, brush his teeth, eat breakfast, and go outside to play or watch cartoons. But today felt different, though he didn't know why at first. Alex climbed out of bed and looked around his room. His toys were scattered across the floor. Books lined the shelves. Posters of astronauts and dinosaurs decorated the walls. That it was all familiar and safe. But a small flutter of excitement, mixed with nervousness, tickled in his chest. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a bowl of cereal. He noticed the sound of the milk pouring, the soft clink of the spoon against the bowl, and the smell of fresh cereal. Everything seemed normal, yet there was a feeling in the air, as if something extraordinary was about to happen. After breakfast, Alex stepped outside. The sun was shining, the grass was green, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of flowers and wet earth. He took a deep breath and felt the cool air fill his lungs. That it smelled fresh, alive, and comforting. Alex wandered toward the forest near his house. That he liked exploring there. The trees stood tall and strong, their leaves whispering in the wind. Birds flitted from branch to branch, and squirrels ran along the ground, their tiny feet making soft rustling sounds. As he walked deeper into the forest, he noticed a strange glow between the trees. That it wasn't sunlight. It shimmered, faint and magical, almost like a reflection in water. Curious, Alex stepped closer. The ground beneath him was soft with moss, and he could hear the crunch of fallen leaves. Every sound seemed louder here, sharper and more alive. When he reached the glow, he saw a small portal. That it shimmered like liquid silver, moving and twisting in the air. Alex's heart began to beat faster. He had never seen anything like this before. That he wanted to touch it, to know what it was. That a voice in his head whispered, "Be brave, but careful." He looked around. There was no one there, just the forest, the birds, and the wind. He swallowed nervously, but stepped closer to the portal. That it felt warm, like sunlight on his skin, and alive, like it was breathing. Before he knew it, the portal pulled him in. That he felt a strange tickling sensation, like floating through water and air at the same time. His feet lifted off the ground, and the trees blurred past him. That it was exciting and frightening all at once. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. When the world stopped spinning, Alex found himself in a strange, ancient forest. The trees were thicker, taller, and darker than any he had seen before. The air smelled earthy and cold, like damp soil and moss. The ground was soft, covered in fallen leaves and pine needles. Everything felt different, heavier, and alive in a way that made his skin tingle. Alex looked around and noticed a small group of people nearby. They were strange, with thick hair, strong muscles, and simple clothes made from animal skins. They were moving carefully, gathering sticks and stones, and carrying small bundles of food. Alex realized with a jolt that he was not at home anymore. He was in the time of the Neanderthals. He took a cautious step forward. His heart beat fast, and his stomach felt like it was full of butterflies. That he wanted to run, but he also wanted to watch, to learn, and to see this strange world. The Neanderthals looked at him curiously, their eyes wide and observant. Alex tried to smile. He hoped they would understand that he meant no harm. But he noticed the details around him. The smell of smoke from a small fire, the soft murmur of voices, low and calm, the texture of the ground beneath his feet, soft moss mixed with rough roots. Even the light felt different here, filtering through the thick canopy of trees in dappled, golden patches. Alex realized that this world was alive in a way his own world was not. Every sound, every smell, every movement mattered. Every step could be important. He would have to learn fast if he wanted to survive. He took a deep breath and tried to calm his racing heart. He watched the Neanderthals work, noticing how carefully they moved. They hunted, gathered, and built with skill and patience. Everything they did was necessary, nothing wasted, nothing hurried. Alex thought about his home again. That he missed his warm bed, his toys, and his parents. But a small spark of excitement grew inside him. He was in a world no one from his time could see. That he was about to have an adventure unlike anything he had ever imagined. And so, With a mixture of fear, wonder, and courage, Alex took his first careful steps into the life of the Neanderthals. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew he would learn, explore, and discover a world full of mysteries, challenges, and lessons. The forest around him whispered, the birds sang, and the wind carried the scent of adventure. Alex smiled, feeling both small and brave that he was ready. In the morning after Alex arrived in the Neanderthal world, he woke to the soft light of dawn. The sun barely peeked over the treetops, painting the forest with gentle gold and green colors. Alex rubbed his eyes and shivered. The air was cooler than it had been the day before, and his pajamas from home offered no protection here. He remembered the warmth of his bed and the comfort of blankets, and he missed them terribly. As he stepped outside, he noticed the forest was alive in ways he had never really seen. Every leaf, every branch, every little sound seemed sharper, clearer, and more important. A bird hopped along a branch, chirping softly that a small squirrel ran past, its tiny feet brushing the ground. Even the wind seemed alive, rustling through the leaves like a whisper. Alex looked around at the Neanderthals. They were already busy. Some were gathering sticks for the fire. Others were inspecting small plants and berries. A few children, slightly older than Alex, ran carefully through the forest, picking up nuts and small fruits. Everything they did was slow, deliberate, and careful. Alex realized that nothing was wasted here. Everything had a purpose. That a Neanderthal woman noticed Alex and walked toward him. She had long, thick hair and strong arms. She didn't speak the same words Alex knew, but her gestures were clear. She pointed to a bush with small berries, and then to Alex that he understood that she wanted him to learn what was safe to eat. Alex approached the bush cautiously. The berries were small, round, and bright red. He picked one and sniffed it. It smelled sweet, but a little sour. He put it in his mouth. It was tart and made his tongue puckered. He tried another, and it was even more sour. He frowned and spit it out. But the Neanderthal woman simply nodded and smiled, as if encouraging him to try again. She then showed him a small root in the ground. Alex dug carefully with his fingers, feeling the dirt crumble around the root. It was long and thin, rough to the touch. He pulled it free and examined it. It didn't smell bad. He tasted a small piece. It was bitter, but not as bad as he expected. He chewed slowly, learning to notice flavors and textures. The woman guided him to a small stream. The water was cold and clear. She gestured for him to drink, showing that water was important to survive. Alex cupped his hands and took a sip. It was refreshing, colder than any water he had at home, and it made him feel alive. He realized that everything in this world required attention and care. Nothing came easily. Hours passed as Alex practiced. He learned to pick berries without damaging the bush. He learned to dig roots gently and taste them carefully. He practiced drinking from the stream without spilling a drop. First, he struggled, spilling water and tasting 2 sour berries. But slowly, he began to understand. He began to feel part of this world. By midday, Alex's stomach growled. He had eaten only a few berries and a small piece of root, but he felt satisfied in a strange, new way. He realized that food here was precious, something to respect and think about. At home, food had always been easy to get. Here, every bite required skill and attention. He was learning patience. The Neanderthals showed him more lessons. They pointed to tracks in the dirt, explaining without words that animals had passed this way. They demonstrated how to hold a small stick to dig or poke. Alex copied carefully, making mistakes and learning from them. Every movement mattered. Every observation counted. As the sun moved across the sky, Alex grew tired but proud. He realized that he was learning something very important. This was not just about finding food. It was about seeing the world, paying attention, and thinking carefully. Every sound, smell, and movement mattered. He felt small, but he also felt part of something bigger than himself. By evening, Alex sat near the fire with the other children. The warmth of the flames felt good on his cold hands. The smell of smoke mixed with the earthy scent of the forest. He watched the Neanderthal adults cook small pieces of meat. Even though he had not yet learned to hunt, he felt that one day he understood that learning would take time, patience, and courage. Before going to sleep, Alex thought about his home again. That he missed his toys, his bed, and his parents. But he felt a small spark of excitement. He was learning how to survive in a world that was completely different from his own. And he knew that tomorrow would bring more lessons, more discoveries, and more challenges as the stars appeared in the darkening sky. Alex closed his eyes as he listened to the soft crackle of the fire, the whisper of the wind, and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. That he realized that learning was not just about surviving, that it was about noticing, understanding, and respecting the world around him. And so, Alex drifted to sleep, dreaming of berries, roots, streams, and the endless lessons that awaited him in this strange, fascinating world. The morning sun slowly rose over the forest, painting the treetops in soft shades of gold and green. Alex woke to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. He stretched his arms and legs, feeling the stiffness from yesterday's lessons. His muscles ached in a way that told him he had been learning something important. Even though it was tiring, he felt proud that as Alex stepped outside, he noticed the Neanderthals already busy with their morning tasks. Some were gathering firewood, stacking sticks carefully so that they would burn well later. Others were inspecting plants and berries, making sure nothing dangerous was nearby. The older children practiced carrying small bundles of food, their movements careful and deliberate. Everything they did seemed slow, thoughtful, and purposeful. Alex joined the children and tried to carry a bundle of sticks at first. It was heavier than he expected. His arms shook, and he nearly dropped the sticks several times. The other children laughed softly, not in a mean way, but in a way that said, "Keep trying. You can do it." Alex smiled, feeling encouraged. He tried again, holding the sticks close to his chest, walking carefully over the uneven forest floor. Step by step, he learned how to balance the weight, how to walk without tripping, and how to keep his hands steady. After the bundle was carried to the fire area, Alex watched the adults demonstrate how to start a fire. They rubbed sticks together, slowly and patiently, creating small sparks. That Alex's eyes widened. He had never thought that fire could be made this way. He tried to imitate them, rubbing sticks together with all his strength. But at first, nothing happened. The adults watched silently, nodding encouragingly. Alex kept trying, sweat forming on his forehead. Finally, a tiny spark appeared, and his heart leapt. He felt proud. Even though the spark was small, that he realized that learning something new took patience, focus, and persistence. Next, Alex learned about water. The adults led him to a stream where the water ran clear and cold. They showed him how to scoop it with his hands, how to sip carefully, and how to carry water back without spilling. That he practiced many times, sometimes spilling, sometimes tipping the water too quickly. But slowly, he began to understand the rhythm of it. He noticed the sound of the water splashing, the way it reflected sunlight, and the coolness as it touched his hands. That as the day went on, Alex faced more challenges. He learned how to identify safe plants and berries, how to avoid dangerous thorns, and how to notice animal tracks in the dirt. He watched the Neanderthals carefully, imitating every small motion. That it was tiring and sometimes frustrating. He stumbled over roots, spilled water, and made mistakes with the berries. But each time, he learned something new. He began to understand that making mistakes was part of learning. The forest around him seemed to notice his efforts. The wind whispered through the trees. The birds sang in the branches, and the soft hum of insects filled the air. Alex felt a strange connection with everything around him. That he realized that surviving here wasn't just about food or fire. That it was about paying attention, being careful, and respecting every living thing. By mid-afternoon, Alex was exhausted but proud. His hands were scratched from handling sticks, his clothes were dirty, and his legs were sore. He sat near the fire and watched as the adults and children worked together. He saw how every small action, stacking sticks, carrying water, tending the fire, was important. Nothing was wasted, nothing was hurried, and everything had a purpose. As the sun began to lower in the sky, Alex learned another lesson: the importance of rest and observation. That he watched the shadows lengthen, listened to the distant calls of animals, and smelled the earthy scent of the forest that he realized that even moments of stillness had meaning. Observing quietly could teach him as much as action. That night, Alex lay down near the fire, wrapped in a simple animal skin that he stared at. The stars above. Noticing how different the sky looked without city lights, he thought about the lessons he had learned, the mistakes he had made, and the new skills he was beginning to master. He felt small in the vast world, but he also felt strong, brave, and capable. Alex realized something important. Surviving in this world would not be easy. Every day would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new discoveries. But he also understood that he could learn, adapt, and grow. The forest had begun to feel like home, not the home he had left behind, but a home filled with adventure, learning, and wonder. And so, with the crackling fire warming him and the gentle night sounds all around, Alex drifted to sleep, ready for whatever challenges the next day would bring. He knew that he had begun a journey that would test him, teach him, and change him forever. The morning came quietly in the forest. Alex opened his eyes and felt the cold air brushing against his skin. The ground beneath him was hard and damp, and the faint smell of wet leaves filled his nose. He shivered as he pulled his thin animal skin around himself, wishing he had something warmer. The Neanderthals were already awake, moving with quiet purpose. They gathered sticks, checked the fire, and looked around carefully, as if listening to the forest itself. Alex watched them and wished he could move so confidently and gracefully. Stepping outside, he felt the frost crunch under his bare feet. The cold made him jump a little, but he took a deep breath. The air was different from the city he knew. It was clean and fresh, filled with life he could see and smell and hear. Birds chirped softly, leaves rustled in the wind, and somewhere far off, a stream whispered over rocks. Alex felt a little afraid, but mostly he felt curious. He wanted to learn how to live here. The first lesson of the day was about shelter. A Neanderthal man showed him a small hollow under a rock. Inside, dried leaves and animal skins were arranged to keep warmth in. Alex tried to copy, moving leaves and smoothing skins, but his fingers were stiff and some leaves crumbled. The man smiled and gently showed him again. Slowly, Alex understood how small changes could make the shelter warmer and safer. Next, he learned to make a fire. The wood was damp from morning dew, and the sparks refused to catch at first. Alex rubbed sticks together over and over. He blew gently on the tiny sparks, and sometimes they went out. Hours passed, and finally, a small flame rose. Alex's chest swelled with pride. The fire was small, but it was a sign he could survive step by step. Afterward, he learned about water. The Neanderthals led him to a cold, rushing stream. They showed him how to fill a container, how to pour carefully, and how to purify it by heating. Alex spilled the water a few times, his hands slipping on the smooth rocks. Each time, he tried again. Slowly, he learned patience, realizing that even the smallest task required attention and care. As the sun rose higher, Alex learned about food. The Neanderthals showed him which berries were safe to eat, which roots were good, and which plants were dangerous. He tasted each carefully, noting the flavors, some sweet, some sour, some bitter. He learned that even a berry could teach a lesson about caution. Every bite mattered. The hours passed as the adults guided him through the forest. They showed him animal tracks and explained how to read them. Alex knelt to trace prints with his fingers. He saw broken twigs, flattened grass, and soft indentations in the dirt. Every detail told a story of where animals had gone, what they had done, and when. Alex realized the forest spoke to those who listened carefully. He learned about tools next. The Neanderthals showed him how to shape stones into sharp edges, how to smooth sticks for digging, and how to tie vines together. His fingers ached, and his hands were scratched and dirty, but each successful tool filled him with pride. He saw that survival depended not just on food and water, but also on the objects that made life easier and safer. In the afternoon, Alex faced climbing a small hill to gather firewood. The slope was steep, and loose rocks made his feet slip. His legs shook as he climbed, but the Neanderthal stayed near, guiding and encouraging him. Step by step, branch by branch, he reached the top. He looked down at the forest below and felt tired but triumphant. He had succeeded because he tried, even when it was hard. Back at the fire, he learned about cooking. He helped build a small fire pit, placed stones for pots, and roasted small pieces of meat. The aroma made his stomach rumble. He tasted slowly, learning how heat changed flavor and texture. He realized even food was a lesson, one in patience and cared. As evening approached, dark clouds gathered. Wind rustled through the trees, bending branches. Alex had never seen weather like this. The Neanderthals moved quickly to secure their shelter, cover the firewood, and protect the small group. Alex helped, placing branches and leaves carefully. He understood that surviving here meant respecting the weather, not fighting it. The storm came, rain and wind shaking the trees. Alex huddled under the animal skins, listening to raindrops hitting the leaves and the fire flickering in the wind. He felt small and frightened, yet comforted by the calm presence of the Neanderthals around him. They moved steadily, showing that even storms could be faced with care and patience. When the storm passed, Alex looked up at the stars. They twinkled like tiny lamps in the night sky, clear and bright. He felt small in the vast world, but also proud. He had learned to face cold, fire, water, food, tools, hills, and storms. He realized that survival was not just about strength. It was about patience, observation, care, and courage. In the days that followed, Alex repeated the lessons many times. He collected berries, hunted small animals, made tools, and built shelters. Every day brought new challenges: a river crossing, a fallen tree, a sudden rainstorm, a strange animal sound at night. Each challenge taught him something new. He learned to listen, to watch, to move slowly and carefully. He learned that mistakes were okay if he paid attention and tried again. He also learned from the Neanderthals themselves. He watched how they laughed quietly, shared food, comforted each other, and taught without anger. He saw that community and care were as important as any tool or skill. Even when he was tired or scared, the presence of others made him brave. One day, Alex woke to find frost on the ground. He learned to start a fire quickly, gather dry wood, and protect his small shelter from the cold. Another day, he climbed a hill to watch the sunrise and learned how the sun's position could guide him through the forest. He began to notice small details: the way birds flew, the patterns in the clouds, the tracks of animals in the dirt. Every detail mattered. By the end of the week, Alex was stronger, wiser, and more patient. He understood that surviving in the Neanderthal world was not about rushing, but about noticing, learning, and respecting. Every day was long and difficult, but every day also brought small victories. Each victory built confidence. Each lesson made him more capable. At night, he would lie under the stars, wrapped in his animal skin, listening to the forest. He felt tired but content. The wind whispered through the trees, the fire crackled softly, and the distant calls of animals reminded him that he was part of this world now, learning its ways slowly, step by step. Alex realized that he could not survive by force or haste. He could survive only by observing, listening, learning, and respecting the forest, the animals, the weather, and the Neanderthals themselves. Each day brought a new lesson, and each night brought reflection. He understood that survival was a long, patient journey, and that he was ready to walk it, even when it was hard. And so, Alex faced the elements, day after day, learning, growing, and slowly becoming stronger. He learned that the world could be harsh, cold, and dangerous, but it was also beautiful, alive, and full of lessons for those willing to see and listen. And as he drifted to sleep each night, he dreamed not only of food and shelter, but of understanding, courage, and the quiet wisdom of the forest. The forest woke slowly. Mist curled over the leaves and branches, and the dew made the earth smell fresh and alive. Alex stirred under his thin animal skin, blinking at the soft gray light filtering through the trees. His body ached in familiar ways, his hands scratched from working with sticks and stones, his legs sore from climbing hills, his fingers stiff from shaping tools, but he felt stronger than he had the week before. The forest had become less frightening and more fascinating. The Neanderthals were already moving quietly. Alex watched them gather firewood and inspect the shelters. He felt a mixture of awe and nervousness. There was so much to learn, and today seemed like a day full of lessons. He rose slowly, pulling his skin tight around his shoulders, and stepped outside. The mist clung to him, cool and damp, but he felt ready. The first task of the day was water. A Neanderthal woman gestured for him to follow her to the stream. She showed him how to look for clear water, how to avoid areas where mud stirred the bottom, and how to find pools where small fish swam. Alex knelt by the water, scooping some in his hands, watching the reflections of the trees and sky ripple across the surface. He practiced until he could fill a small container without spilling a drop. It seemed simple, but he learned patience and precision with every careful movement. After water came food. The forest was alive with options, but Alex had to learn which ones were safe. The adults showed him edible roots hidden under fallen leaves, how to identify berries by their color and smell, and which mushrooms were dangerous. Alex tasted some carefully, noticing the sweet flavor of a berry and the earthy taste of a root. He learned that even small mistakes could be dangerous, and that attention to detail mattered more than strength or speed. By mid-morning, the Neanderthals introduced him to hunting lessons. Alex was too small to chase large animals, but he could set simple traps and learn to track. The adults demonstrated how to tie vines to sticks to make snares, how to position them along paths where animals walked, and how to check them safely. Alex tried again and again. Some snares fell apart, others were placed incorrectly, but with patience, he succeeded in setting a simple trap that could catch a small rabbit. The lesson in tracking animals followed. Alex knelt on the soft earth, tracing paw prints and broken twigs with his fingers. He learned how fresh tracks looked wet and soft, while older tracks dried and cracked. He observed patterns, the way a deer might zigzag to avoid predators, the way small animals made hiding places in grass or leaves. He realized the forest spoke to those who paid attention, and every step told a story if he was willing to listen. As the sun climbed higher, Alex was sent to gather firewood. The forest floor was thick with fallen branches, many heavy or awkwardly shaped. He learned how to choose dry wood, how to balance a pile on his back, and how to avoid injuring himself on hidden rocks or thorns. His muscles ached, but each successful trip strengthened him and taught him endurance and careful planning. Midday brought lessons in toolmaking. The Neanderthals showed Alex how to chip stones into sharp edges, how to shape sticks for digging, and how to tie vines to create useful handles. His hands were scratched and blistered from the work, but with each success, he felt pride. He understood that survival relied not just on food, water, or shelter, but on the small objects crafted with care that made life possible. In the afternoon, the group moved to a small hill near a clearing. Alex climbed carefully, feeling his legs tremble with fatigue. At the top, the view stretched out across the forest. Birds flew overhead, a distant river glimmered, and the trees swayed in the gentle wind. The Neanderthals taught him to observe the environment from high points, where predators might hide, where water flowed, and where food could be found. Alex realized that survival required careful observation, not just strength or speed. The evening brought the challenge of cooking. Alex helped arrange stones around a fire pit, gathered kindling, and learned to roast small pieces of meat. He noticed how heat changed flavor and texture. The aroma made his stomach growl, but he waited patiently, tasting carefully to avoid burns. He learned that patience, attention, and care mattered as much in cooking as in hunting or gathering. Night arrived with sudden cold. Dark clouds rolled in, and a light wind turned to gusts. The Neanderthals reinforced their shelters and covered firewood, showing Alex how to protect themselves from storms. He helped as best as he could, feeling the cold bite through his thin clothing. He learned that surviving in the wild meant respecting nature and preparing for it, not fighting against it. The storm passed slowly, leaving the forest wet and glistening under a bright moon. Alex lay under his animal skin, listening to the distant calls of animals, the soft rustle of leaves, and the crackle of the fire. He thought about the day, the water, the food, the tools, the climbing, the cooking, and the storm. Each challenge had taught him patience, observation, courage, and care. He realized that survival was not a single skill, but a combination of many, learned slowly over time. Over the next days, Alex faced more challenges. He learned to cross a small river without slipping, to identify edible and poisonous plants more accurately, to build more secure shelters, and to sharpen his tools to a finer edge. He experienced cold nights, hot days, rainstorms, and unexpected animal encounters. Each experience, repeated many times, became a lesson in observation, patience, and careful action. He also learned from the Neanderthals themselves. He observed their humor, their ways of sharing, their quiet teaching without anger or frustration. He saw how they supported each other, how they respected nature, and how they planned for the future. Alex realized that survival was as much about community, learning, and respect as it was about food, water, and shelter. Each night, as Alex lay under the stars, he reflected on what he had learned. He thought about the animals he had tracked, the berries he had gathered, the fire he had tended, and the storms he had endured. He realized that each day was a small step toward understanding the forest, understanding the Neanderthals, and understanding himself. He felt both small in the vastness of the world and proud of how far he had come. As weeks passed, Alex became stronger, more careful, and more observant. He could gather food more efficiently, set traps more successfully, and build tools with less effort. He noticed patterns in the forest, how the wind shifted, how animals moved, how the weather changed. He understood that survival depended on learning, patience, and respect for all living things. Alex faced dangerous situations as well. One day, a wild animal approached the group. The Neanderthals moved calmly, guiding Alex to safety while securing their small camp. Alex learned the importance of staying quiet, watching closely, and moving carefully. Another day, a sudden storm washed away some of their firewood, and Alex helped rebuild it, learning resilience and quick thinking. Throughout it all, Alex discovered something important. Surviving in the Neanderthal world was not about rushing or forcing strength. It was about observing, learning, repeating tasks, respecting nature, and working with others. Each challenge was a lesson, each mistake a chance to learn. He began to understand the rhythm of the forest, the patterns of animals, and the quiet wisdom of the Neanderthals. And so, day by day, Alex grew stronger, wiser, and more capable. The forest, once frightening and strange, became familiar and alive. The Neanderthals, once intimidating and mysterious, became teachers, guides, and friends. Alex realized that survival was a journey, not a single moment, and that every step, no matter how small, was important. The following morning, Alex woke to the gentle sound of birds chirping and leaves rustling in the early breeze. The forest smelled damp and earthy after a night of rain. Tiny droplets clung to the moss and grass, sparkling like little jewels in the soft sunlight. He rubbed his eyes and stretched, feeling the soreness in his muscles from the previous day's work. The Neanderthals were already moving quietly through the camp, preparing for another day full of learning. Alex tried to mimic their calm movements, knowing that haste or clumsiness could lead to accidents or wasted effort. Their first task was learning to identify tracks. Alex knelt beside a small patch of soft soil, where rain had left clear impressions of animal feet. The Neanderthals showed him the difference between fresh prints and old ones, how to see the size and depth of the tracks, and how to notice tiny clues, like the drag of a tail or the placement of claws. Alex traced each print with his finger, asking questions quietly in his mind about where the animal might go, what it might eat, and when it had passed. He realized that the forest was full of stories, but only those who paid attention could read them. After tracking, the Neanderthals taught him about seasonal changes. They pointed out trees that had lost their leaves, moss that grew in damp shadows, and birds preparing for migration. Alex learned that the forest had a rhythm, a steady cycle of growth, rest, and renewal. He understood that surviving here meant not just meeting immediate needs, but planning for tomorrow and the next season. By midday, Alex's stomach rumbled. The group gathered small roots and berries again, but this time, the Neanderthals encouraged him to try cooking them in new ways. Alex carefully arranged hot stones in a shallow pit, placed roots on top, and covered them with leaves. He learned how the heat from the stones cooked the food slowly, changing its texture and taste. He felt pride in this small accomplishment, knowing that each meal he prepared brought not just sustenance, but knowledge and skill. The afternoon brought another lesson in climbing and observation. The Neanderthals guided Alex up a rocky incline near the river. Step by careful step, he learned to test each foothold before putting his weight down, to grip rocks and branches with steady hands, and to pause to catch his breath when his muscles burned. At the top, they paused to scan the horizon. From this vantage point, Alex saw deer grazing, birds nesting, and distant trees swaying. The Neanderthals explained how elevation could help detect danger, find food, and understand the land. Alex realized that careful observation from different perspectives was as important as physical strength. As the sun began to dip, Alex learned another crucial skill: fire management. The Neanderthals showed him how to gather dry tinder without disturbing the soil, how to place kindling for maximum airflow, and how to tend a fire without letting it die or grow too large. He watched the flames dance and crackle, understanding that fire was both a tool and a responsibility. They taught him that fire provided warmth, light, and protection, but only if respected and handled carefully. Night arrived slowly, bringing with it a chill. Alex and the Neanderthals sat around the fire, sharing small stories and teaching moments. The adults demonstrated how to listen to sounds in the dark, how to notice subtle shifts in the wind, and how to watch for signs of approaching animals. Alex felt a mix of fear and fascination. He understood that the night held dangers, but also lessons in patience, attention, and courage. For several days, Alex repeated these routines. He tracked animals, prepared food, maintained fire, observed seasonal changes, and climbed hills. Each day, he improved slightly, noticing more details and performing tasks with more confidence. His hands became calloused, his legs strong, and his mind sharper. He began to see patterns: which plants thrived near streams, which animals moved in groups, and which signs indicated approaching storms. One morning, Alex faced a challenge he had not yet encountered. A sudden flood from overnight rain swept through the riverbank, washing away small shelters and scattering tools. Panic fluttered in his chest, but the Neanderthals remained calm. They showed him how to secure remaining supplies, how to rebuild shelters quickly, and how to remain safe when water rose unexpectedly. Alex realized that survival required resilience, quick thinking, and a calm mind in the face of sudden danger. Later, Alex helped the group set new traps along the higher banks of the river. He learned to tie knots more securely, to place traps along animal paths, and to check them without scaring the animals. Successes were small at first: one rabbit caught here, a bird trapped there, but each success built confidence. Alex understood that survival was often a series of small victories, not a single great achievement. Evenings were a time for reflection. Alex would sit quietly, wrapped in his animal skin, listening to the forest's nightly symphony. He heard owls hoot, the rustle of nocturnal animals, and the distant splash of fish in the river. He thought about the lessons of the day: the traps, the climbs, the cooking, the observations, and understood that each challenge was shaping him into someone who could navigate the forest. Weeks passed, and Alex began to feel a deep connection to the land. He could smell the approach of rain, sense the presence of deer in nearby meadows, and notice subtle changes in plant growth. He had learned to move quietly, to observe closely, and to respond patiently. The forest, once frightening, had become familiar and alive, a place where every leaf, stone, and footprint held meaning. Alex also learned more about the Neanderthals themselves. He noticed how they worked together, shared food, and protected each other. He saw their patience with one another, their laughter, and their careful attention to teaching him without anger or frustration. He realized that survival was as much about cooperation, understanding, and community as it was about food, water, and shelter. The morning came quietly, with a soft mist hanging low over the ground. Alex woke under his animal skin, listening to the distant rustle of the trees and the gentle drip of dew from leaves. His body ached from the day before, but he felt a sense of readiness. He had learned that each ache, each sore muscle, was a sign that he was growing stronger, learning more, and slowly becoming part of the rhythm of the forest. The Neanderthals were already moving quietly, gathering firewood and inspecting the small shelters they had built. Alex rose and joined them, careful to mimic their calm, deliberate movements. He learned early that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes in the forest could be dangerous. He carried branches and small logs to the fire pit, feeling the texture of the wood and noting which pieces would burn best. After breakfast, the group gathered to discuss the day's work. The Neanderthals pointed toward a dense part of the forest where fruit-bearing trees grew. Alex's task was to collect food, but he had to do it carefully, watching for signs of predators and avoiding dangerous plants. As he moved through the underbrush, he noticed small details: the shape of leaves, the sound of a bird in the branches, a faint trail of animal footprints. Each observation was a small piece of a larger puzzle, a lesson in seeing the forest not just as a place to survive, but as a living, breathing world full of patterns and life. The day passed slowly, with many small lessons. Alex learned to identify subtle differences between edible and poisonous plants. He watched how the Neanderthals tested unfamiliar berries, smelling and tasting them cautiously, and he copied their careful methods. He discovered that patience was more important than haste. Waiting to observe, testing small samples, and thinking before acting kept him safe and taught him more than rushing ever could. By mid-morning, the group moved to a rocky area where small animals burrowed. Alex learned to set traps using sticks and vines, placing them in areas where tracks showed the most activity. He made mistakes at first. The traps collapsed or were placed incorrectly, but each failure was a lesson. The Neanderthals never scolded him. Instead, they demonstrated again, patiently guiding his hands, showing him the importance of small adjustments and careful observation. As the sun climbed higher, Alex's arms ached from gathering berries, building traps, and climbing small hills. Yet he felt a quiet satisfaction. Each action, repeated over and over, was teaching him resilience, strength, and awareness. He realized that survival was not about a single heroic act, but about countless small actions performed carefully, with thought and attention. The afternoon brought a new challenge: crossing a fast-moving stream. The Neanderthals demonstrated how to find stable rocks, how to balance on slippery surfaces, and how to keep weight centered to avoid falling. Alex's first attempts were clumsy. His foot slipped, and water rushed past him, chilling his legs. He paused, caught his breath, and tried again. Slowly, carefully, he managed to reach the other side. The experience taught him a lesson he would never forget. Perseverance, careful planning, and calmness could overcome fear and difficulty. After the stream, Alex and the Neanderthals moved to a small clearing where they prepared food. He learned how to roast roots and small meat over a fire, how to cover food with leaves to keep it warm, and how to tend the flames without letting them grow too large or die out. The smell of cooking filled the air, and Alex felt pride in his growing ability to provide nourishment, not just for himself, but for the group. Night approached, bringing a chill and long shadows. The Neanderthals reinforced the shelters, checking that all firewood was stored safely and that tools were put away. Alex helped as best as he could, feeling the satisfaction of contributing to the safety of the camp. He learned that survival required constant vigilance, careful preparation, and an understanding of how the environment could change quickly. As the stars appeared, Alex lay under his animal skin, listening to the sounds of the night. Owls called, leaves rustled, and the distant river whispered. He reflected on the lessons of the day: patience in gathering, careful observation in tracking, perseverance in crossing the stream, and attentiveness in cooking and fire maintenance. Each day, he realized, was a small step in learning the ways of the wild. Over the following days, Alex faced new challenges. He encountered sudden rainstorms that soaked the camp and tested the durability of the shelters. He learned to observe weather patterns, noticing changes in clouds, wind, and animal behavior. He discovered how to prepare for storms, securing tools, reinforcing shelters, and tending fires to keep them alive through the night. Each experience taught him patience, foresight, and careful planning that he also practiced more advanced tracking. Alex learned to follow faint animal trails, reading the subtle signs of movement in grass, mud, and leaves. He began to recognize patterns: how deer moved in the morning versus evening, how birds reacted to nearby predators, and how small animals left subtle clues of their presence. These lessons taught him that survival required attention to detail, observation, and understanding the rhythm of the natural world. Alex spent hours each day practicing toolmaking. He chipped stones into sharp edges, shaped sticks for digging or defense, and tied vines to create handles. Each tool required time, effort, and focus. Mistakes were frequent, but with patience, he learned to create items that were useful, reliable, and durable. He realized that survival was not just about using nature, but shaping it carefully to meet human needs. Evenings became a time for reflection and quiet learning. Alex listened to the Neanderthals as they communicated with gestures and sounds, learning not only practical survival skills, but also the values of patience, cooperation, and respect. He observed how they worked together without conflict, sharing food, teaching skills, and protecting one another. Alex understood that survival was a balance of skill, observation, and social cooperation. Weeks turned into months, and Alex grew stronger, wiser, and more confident. He could gather food efficiently, track animals with skill, maintain fires through rainstorms, and craft tools with precision. He noticed small patterns in the forest, where streams overflowed, where berries ripened first, and how animals reacted to changing seasons. The forest, once a frightening place, had become a teacher, each leaf, stone, and animal imparting lessons about life, patience, and perseverance. Alex also learned to anticipate danger. He observed predators, avoided unstable terrain, and learned when to retreat or wait. Each challenge taught him more than fear. It taught him planning, caution, and the importance of slow, deliberate action. He realized that survival depended as much on careful thought and observation as on strength or bravery. Nights were a time for storytelling. The Neanderthals shared gestures and simple sounds to recount experiences of their own lives, teaching Alex lessons about courage, preparation, and respect for nature. He learned to listen, interpret, and remember, realizing that knowledge passed down through generations was as vital as any tool or food source. The next morning, Alex awoke to the sound of rain tapping lightly on the leaves above. The forest smelled damp and fresh, and tiny rivulets of water ran down the trunks of trees. He pulled his animal skin closer around his shoulders, shivering slightly, and watched as the Neanderthals moved calmly through the mist, gathering wood and checking their shelters. Alex noticed how carefully they stepped over roots and puddles, never rushing, always deliberate. Today's lesson was about water. The Neanderthals guided him to a small spring hidden behind thick ferns. The water was crystal clear and cold, and they showed Alex how to collect it safely, avoiding contaminated puddles or stagnant pools. He learned to observe tiny changes in the forest, how the leaves bent under rain, how the soil softened near the spring, and how small insects indicated the presence of water. Even the tiniest details could be clues to survival. After drinking, Alex practiced building simple dams with stones and sticks, learning to redirect small streams to irrigate plants or create safe drinking areas. His first attempts were clumsy. Water spilled over the edges, knocking his carefully placed stones into the mud. The Neanderthals demonstrated again, patiently showing him how to layer stones, pack soil, and adjust placement. Alex tried again, and slowly, his small dam held water. The sense of accomplishment was quiet but profound. He had learned to shape the environment, not just react to it. Later, they moved deeper into the forest to forage for food. Alex learned to distinguish edible plants from dangerous ones, noticing subtle differences in leaf shape, stem thickness, and smell. He picked small berries and roots, tasting each cautiously, just as the Neanderthals had taught him. Some were sweet, some bitter, and some caused a mild, unpleasant sensation that reminded him to be careful. Mistakes were part of learning, and each taught him more about the natural world. By midday, the sun broke through the clouds, warming the damp forest floor. Alex helped prepare a meal using his newly learned fire skills. He arranged stones for a small fire pit, carefully placed kindling and larger logs, and tended the flames so they burned steadily without smoldering. He roasted roots and small game over the fire, savoring the smell and warmth. The Neanderthals watched quietly, nodding in approval at his growing skill and attention to detail. In the afternoon, Alex faced a new challenge, tracking a small deer through thick underbrush. The Neanderthals showed him how to read footprints, broken twigs, and bent grasses to predict the animal's path. Alex followed carefully, noticing every subtle sign. His heart raced as he caught sight of the deer grazing quietly, unaware of his presence. He learned patience, moving slowly and silently, understanding that sudden movements would ruin the opportunity. Although he did not catch the deer that day, he learned more about observation, timing, and strategy than he could have from any book. As night approached, Alex helped reinforce the shelters, stacking extra branches to protect against wind and rain. He tended the fire carefully, adding small twigs so it would burn steadily through the night. The forest was alive with sounds: owls hooting, leaves rustling, and the distant call of a fox. But Alex felt safer than he had at first. He understood that preparation and awareness made the night less frightening, turning potential danger into a manageable challenge. Over the following days, Alex practiced more advanced skills. He learned to create rudimentary fishing tools, crafting hooks from small bones, and tying lines from plant fibers. He discovered which parts of the river were safest for catching fish and how to read water movement for signs of activity. His first attempts were slow, but gradually he succeeded, catching small fish that added variety and nutrition to the group's meals. Alex also began to learn about the seasons. He observed which trees bore fruit first, which plants wilted in heat, and how animal behavior changed as the days grew warmer. The Neanderthals taught him how to plan ahead, storing food for lean days and preparing for shifts in weather. Alex realized that survival was not just about meeting today's needs. It was about thinking weeks or months ahead, understanding the rhythm of nature, and acting with foresight. Evenings became a time of quiet learning and reflection. Alex listened to the forest at night, noting the differences in sound, smell, and movement from day to day. He thought about the lessons of the past weeks: patience in gathering, perseverance in tracking, careful observation of nature, and cooperation with the Neanderthals. Each day's experiences built on the last, slowly transforming him from a frightened outsider into a competent, thoughtful member of the group. Storms occasionally arrived, testing Alex's skills and resolve. Heavy rain flooded parts of the camp, knocking down small shelters and scattering supplies. Alex learned to move quickly and safely, securing tools, reinforcing shelters, and tending fires in dangerous conditions. The Neanderthals remained calm, demonstrating that composure under pressure was as important as physical strength. Alex understood that survival required more than courage. It required calm thinking, adaptability, and resilience. Tracking became more advanced. Alex learned to follow faint animal trails over long distances, noticing subtle signs like broken leaves, disturbed soil, or bent branches. He began to anticipate the movements of animals, predicting their paths and understanding their behaviors. The lessons were slow and repetitive, but each small success built confidence and skill. He realized that survival depended not on speed or force, but on observation, patience, and knowledge of the environment. Toolmaking advanced as well. Alex experimented with shaping stones into sharp blades, carving wooden handles, and crafting digging tools. Mistakes were frequent. Tools broke, handles splintered, lines untied, but the Neanderthals guided him with patience. Slowly, his creations became reliable, practical, and useful. Each tool was not just a physical object, but a lesson in problem solving, persistence, and care. Nights were filled with quiet observation and storytelling. The Neanderthals shared their experiences, teaching Alex lessons about courage, foresight, and respect for nature. He listened attentively, learning to interpret their gestures, sounds, and expressions. He realized that knowledge, passed down through careful teaching, was as vital as any tool or skill. As weeks turned into months, Alex grew stronger, more capable, and increasingly attuned to the rhythms of the forest. He could gather food efficiently, track animals with skill, maintain fires in rainstorms, craft durable tools, and anticipate environmental changes. The forest, once intimidating and confusing, had become a teacher and companion. Each leaf, stone, and animal movement was a lesson, each day a step in his transformation. That Alex's understanding of danger deepened. He learned to detect predators, avoid treacherous terrain, and respond appropriately to sudden threats. He understood that survival was a balance of caution, observation, and action. The forest was no longer frightening. It was a living classroom, offering endless lessons to those who paid attention. The forest at night had a voice that Alex was only beginning to understand. Every rustle, whisper, and distant snap was a message if he could only learn to listen. The Neanderthals walked alongside him, their movements quiet but sure, showing him how to sense the forest in ways he never imagined. Alex learned that the key to survival was awareness. He began each night by standing very still, closing his eyes, and opening every sense. He could feel the vibrations of small animals moving over the earth, hear the faintest crackle of a twig far ahead, and smell the faint scent of moss, water, and the breath of creatures hidden in the dark. One of the first lessons was patience. Nights could be long. Sometimes Alex would follow a rabbit trail for hours, careful not to scare it away, or wait for a hedgehog to emerge from its hiding spot. He learned to breathe slowly, to calm his mind, and to watch without expecting immediate results. The Neanderthals explained that survival often meant waiting, observing, and acting only when the moment was right. Impatience could lead to mistakes, and mistakes could be dangerous. Alex also began to notice patterns in the forest. Certain areas were quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves, while others were alive with nocturnal activity. He discovered small clearings where animals came to drink from hidden streams, and narrow paths where wolves sometimes passed. Tracking became a daily exercise in observation. He learned to recognize the direction of footprints, the shape of broken branches, and even the faint odor trails left by animals. Each clue helped him anticipate movement and plan his actions. Hunting at night became an art form. The Neanderthals showed him how to make silent tools from stone, sharpened sticks, and carefully tied snares. Alex's first attempts were clumsy. He tripped over roots, startled small animals, and sometimes lost the game entirely. But each mistake was a lesson. Gradually, he learned to move quietly, position himself strategically, and use his tools effectively. He began to catch small animals not only for food, but also for practice. Understanding the rhythm of the forest and the behavior of its creatures, fire management remained crucial. The Neanderthals taught Alex how to build a low, controlled fire that would provide light and warmth without drawing unwanted attention. He learned to gather dry twigs, arrange stones to contain the flames, and cover the fire quickly in case of sudden rain or wind. One night, during a fierce storm, Alex watched as the Neanderthals protected their fire while the wind tore through the trees. He helped cover the flames with wet leaves and adjust the stones to keep the heat inside. By the end of the storm, he realized that fire was more than warmth. It was life itself, a guide in the darkness, a signal, and a shield against fear. The stars became a new teacher. The Neanderthals pointed out constellations, explained how to navigate by their positions, and described how the changing sky could predict weather. Alex spent hours lying on the forest floor, gazing upward. He noticed patterns, learned how to estimate direction, and began to feel a connection to the cycles of the sky. The night was no longer just darkness. It was a map, a calendar, and a guide to living safely in the wilderness. The forest also tested Alex in unexpected ways. One night, he encountered a wolf near a stream. Heart pounding, he remembered the lessons. Stay calm, do not make sudden movements, and slowly back away. The wolf watched him with keen eyes, sniffing the air, then silently disappeared into the shadows. Alex exhaled slowly, amazed at how understanding behavior and maintaining composure could turn fear into safety. From that night on, he observed predators carefully, learning when to hide, when to retreat, and when to move quietly. Storms became regular teachers as well. Rain, wind, and cold challenged every skill Alex had learned. He reinforced shelters with branches and leaves, moved supplies to higher ground, and ensured fires remained protected. Each storm was a test of foresight, patience, and resilience. The Neanderthals worked calmly beside him, teaching him that planning ahead could turn danger into comfort. After the storm, Alex would sometimes lie awake, listening to the forest return to silence, reflecting on all that had been learned. Food storage and preparation became vital as winter approached. Alex learned to dry and preserve meat, store nuts and berries safely, and protect supplies from scavengers. He observed how the Neanderthals rotated their caches, checking for spoilage and ensuring enough remained for long nights. The forest offered abundance if one was careful, patient, and thoughtful. Every berry picked, every piece of meat preserved, and every trap set was part of a careful system that ensured survival. Daily routines blended with nightly vigilance. During the day, Alex gathered food, made tools, and studied plant life. At night, he tracked animals, listened for sounds, observed the stars, and practiced moving quietly. Each action reinforced the others, building a comprehensive skill set. He realized that survival was not just about strength, but about observation, adaptability, and harmony with the world around him. Alex also learned to communicate over distances at night. Using small signals of fire, light, or sound, he could alert others to danger, call for assistance, or mark safe paths. The Neanderthals emphasized that cooperation was essential. Even the most skilled individual could not survive alone for long. Alex's confidence grew as he mastered these subtle forms of communication, understanding that survival depended on both skill and teamwork. Evenings became moments of reflection. Alex would sit by the fire, thinking about everything he had learned: the patterns of animal movement, the songs of the night creatures, the changes in weather, the positions of the stars, and the lessons from predators. Each night added layers to his understanding of the forest, and each lesson brought him closer to living confidently in a world so different from the one he had left behind. Over weeks and months, Alex noticed his own transformation. He could move through the forest silently, find food efficiently, maintain fire in any weather, understand animal behavior, and communicate effectively with the Neanderthals. The night was no longer frightening. It was a classroom, a place of learning, and a space for reflection. Each challenge, storm, hunt, and observation had shaped him into someone attuned to the rhythms of nature. By the time winter fully arrived, Alex was no longer just a visitor in the forest. He had become a part of it. He understood the whispers of leaves, the rhythm of animals, the language of the stars, and the guidance of fire. Nights were no longer a time of fear, but a time of learning, skill building, and quiet wonder. He realized that the Neanderthals had taught him far more than survival. They had shown him how to live in harmony with the world around him, respecting every creature, every plant, and every lesson the forest offered. Winter came to the forest with quiet but powerful steps. The air grew colder each day, and frost painted the leaves and grass in sparkling white. Alex could see his breath rising in little clouds as he walked through the camp. He wrapped himself tightly in the furs the Neanderthals had helped him prepare, and every morning, he marveled at the world transformed by snow. The forest was beautiful, yes, but it was also unforgiving. Winter would teach him lessons he could never forget. Food became the first challenge. Many animals hibernated, while others were harder to track in the snow. Alex learned to recognize faint tracks left in the frost, spotting even the tiniest imprint of a paw or claw. The Neanderthals guided him to store more food than ever before, showing how to hide it safely beneath layers of leaves and snow, so scavengers and cold would not ruin their supplies. Each day became a careful balance of gathering, preserving, and rationing, and Alex quickly realized that laziness or carelessness in winter could be dangerous. The cold tested his body in ways he had never experienced. Fingers and toes grew numb, and muscles ached from trudging through snowdrifts. At first, Alex shivered constantly, unable to stay warm even by the fire. The Neanderthals patiently showed him how to layer furs effectively, how to build windbreaks with branches and leaves, and how to huddle near the fire to conserve heat. Over time, his body began to adjust. He could work longer in the snow, carry supplies, and even sleep outside in sub-zero temperatures without panic. The forest had forced him to grow stronger, braver, and more resilient. Winter nights were long and dark, stretching into hours of silence broken only by the soft creaking of frost-laden branches. Alex continued his nightly observations, but he had to adapt his methods. Some animals were quieter at night, and others moved in entirely new patterns. The Neanderthals showed him how to track by scent as well as by sight, teaching him to notice even the faintest disturbances in the snow. Every successful hunt or observation felt like a victory, and every mistake a harsh but valuable lesson. Survival required creativity in winter. Water sources sometimes froze over, so Alex learned to melt ice carefully over the fire. Food had to be cooked differently, and tools had to be protected from the cold, which could make stone brittle and would stiff. One day, he learned the hard way when a spear he had sharpened broke during a hunt. He understood that in winter, the smallest miscalculation could have consequences. Slowly, he became inventive, adjusting tools, techniques, and routines to fit the harsh conditions. The Neanderthals shared stories by the fire on the longest nights, teaching Alex about the cycles of nature, the importance of remembering lessons from elders, and the ways of the animals. These evenings were comforting, filled with laughter, small songs, and tales of survival. Alex realized that community was essential in winter for warmth, food, protection, and encouragement. Even the strongest individual could struggle alone, but together, they thrived. One morning, Alex woke to find a heavy snowfall had covered the forest. The familiar trails were gone, hidden beneath a blanket of white. He had to learn to navigate without the usual signs, relying on distant landmarks, stars, and careful observation. The snow slowed every movement, making even the simplest tasks take longer. Yet with patience, he began to move efficiently again, learning that every challenge was also an opportunity to grow stronger and wiser. Winter also revealed the quiet dangers of the forest. Thin ice covered streams, hiding deep water beneath. Snowdrifts concealed holes and rocks that could trip him. One day, while retrieving stored food, Alex stepped on ice that cracked under his weight. He slipped, fell, and soaked his clothes in freezing water. He shivered violently and felt fear creeping into his heart. But the Neanderthals helped him, showing how to dry, warm, and protect himself from hypothermia. From that day, Alex learned never to underestimate the hidden threats of winter. As the weeks passed, Alex noticed his own transformation. He could gather, track, hunt, and maintain warmth in a way that would have been impossible when he first arrived. He could move silently through snow, recognize animals from subtle signs, and anticipate changes in weather. He understood the importance of rest, preparation, and observation, and the forest had become both a teacher and a companion. Despite the harshness, there was beauty in winter. Snow sparkled on branches, streams froze into delicate patterns, and animals adapted in fascinating ways. Alex observed foxes and wolves hunting, birds finding hidden seeds, and deer carefully picking their paths through the snow. He realized that survival was not only about strength, but also about respect, patience, and understanding the rhythm of life around him. Winter nights often ended with Alex staring at the stars, much as he had in warmer seasons, reflecting on his growth. He realized that each challenge, each frozen stream, and each silent predator had taught him something invaluable. The Neanderthal's guidance, combined with his own observation and experience, had transformed him from a modern person lost in the forest to someone capable of thriving in a world without modern conveniences. By the time the coldest weeks passed, Alex felt a deep sense of pride and connection. The forest, harsh as it was, had taught him resilience, patience, and ingenuity. He understood that survival was a combination of skill, knowledge, and respect for nature, and that even the most difficult winter could be overcome with careful attention and determination. Winter, Alex realized, was more than a season. It was a teacher of life itself. It showed him that the world was challenging, beautiful, and full of lessons, waiting for those willing to observe, listen, and learn. And as he huddled near the fire with the Neanderthals, watching snowflakes dance in the night air, he felt a quiet gratitude for the knowledge, skills, and courage he had gained in this frozen, silent classroom. Spring arrived slowly, like a gentle whisper, melting the snow and waking the forest from its long winter sleep. Alex could see the change day by day. Ice breaking on streams, buds appearing on trees, and the first shy flowers peeking through the damp earth. The air smelled sweeter, warmer, and full of life. With each new day, the forest seemed to invite him to explore, hunt, and learn in a world that was both familiar and entirely new. The first lesson of spring was patience. Winter had tested Alex's strength and resilience, but spring would test his awareness. The forest was alive with movement. Animals emerged from their hiding places, some hungry and cautious, others curious and bold. Birds filled the air with sound, insects buzzed in the warming sunlight, and new plants offered fresh food. Alex had to learn which signs meant safety, which meant danger, and how to move carefully without disturbing the delicate balance around him. Water was easier to find now that streams and ponds had thawed, but it still required care. The Neanderthals taught Alex to check for cleanliness and flow, avoiding stagnant pools where sickness could hide. He learned to recognize plants that could purify water and how to use stones and sand to filter debris. The streams themselves were teachers, showing how the forest survived and reminding Alex that every small detail mattered when living in nature. Spring hunting was different from winter. Animals were more active, moving with the new abundance of food. Alex had to sharpen his observation skills, noticing even the smallest footprints, disturbed leaves, and snapped twigs. He learned to anticipate where animals might drink, feed, or rest, setting traps carefully and moving quietly to avoid detection. One morning, he watched a fox from a hidden spot, learning its habits and how it hunted small creatures. He realized that understanding animals was as important as catching them. Plant life offered new challenges and opportunities. Alex discovered edible greens, berries, and roots that had not been visible in winter. The Neanderthals taught him which plants were safe, which could heal, and which could poison. He experimented cautiously, tasting only small amounts, observing reactions, and learning through practice. Spring became a season of learning about nature's generosity and about the care needed to take advantage of it safely. Weather patterns shifted quickly in spring. Gentle rains could turn into sudden storms, and warmth could vanish in a sudden cold snap. Alex learned to read the clouds, smell changes in the air, and feel shifts in the wind. The Neanderthals explained that survival depended on preparation and observation, and that being caught unaware could turn a pleasant day into a dangerous one. He began to carry small emergency supplies, build temporary shelters quickly, and maintain readiness at all times. Spring also brought lessons in teamwork and communication. The forest was alive with more animals and opportunities, but also more dangers. Alex worked alongside the Neanderthals to gather food, monitor wildlife, and secure their camp. He learned subtle signals for danger, safe paths, and hidden resources. Cooperation became vital. No one could manage the forest alone, and every member of the group had skills to contribute. One morning, Alex discovered a nest of baby birds that had fallen from a tree. He carefully observed their movements and calls, learning how the parents fed and protected them. The Neanderthals explained the importance of respecting life, and that sometimes helping meant observing and protecting without interfering. Alex realized that survival wasn't just about taking from the forest, it was about understanding, respecting, and sometimes giving back. Fire remained important in spring, though for different reasons than in winter. It provided warmth during cool nights, a way to cook food, and a signal to others. Alex practiced starting fires with small twigs and stones, learning the balance of heat, fuel, and smoke. He observed how the Neanderthals controlled fire safely, using it to cook, keep insects away, and create light without endangering the forest. Each fire was a lesson in patience, observation, and care. Spring nights were full of sounds. Alex would lie awake listening to frogs croaking, owls calling, and animals moving through the underbrush. Each sound told a story if he listened carefully. He began to anticipate movements, predict changes in weather, and understand the balance between predator and prey. Nights were no longer frightening. They were classrooms filled with invisible lessons that as spring progressed, Alex noticed the growth within himself. He was stronger, more observant, and more patient. He had learned to move quietly, identify plants and animals, maintain warmth and shelter, and anticipate challenges. His senses were sharper, his mind more focused, and his heart more attuned to the rhythm of the forest. Each day offered a new lesson, a new challenge, and a new moment of discovery. By the end of spring, the forest was a vibrant, living world around Alex. He had become a careful observer, a patient tracker, and a thoughtful participant in the cycle of life. He understood that every action had consequences, every sound had meaning, and every moment was an opportunity to learn. Spring had taught him that survival was not just a matter of strength or skill. It was a matter of attention, respect, and understanding. Alex looked around the forest with gratitude. He had survived winter, learned its harsh lessons, and now embraced the abundance of spring. He knew challenges would continue, but he also knew that he had the skills, knowledge, and patience to face whatever came next. The forest was no longer just a place to survive. It was a world to explore, understand, and live within. Summer came to the valley like a mighty wave of warmth, washing over the land and filling it with light. The long days stretched endlessly, the sun climbing high into the sky, pouring its heat onto the trees, the rivers, and the people who lived beneath its glow. For Alex, it was the first time he truly felt the rhythm of the ancient seasons. Winter had been harsh, spring had been awakening, but summer was abundance, and abundance brought its own challenges. The snow was long gone, and the rivers ran strong with melted ice from the mountains. Flowers had blossomed, and the trees wore full crowns of green leaves. Animals moved with confidence, for food was everywhere: berries on the bushes, insects buzzing in the air, fish in the streams, and prey animals fattening on the endless supply of grass and shoots. To someone from the modern world, summer might seem like a season of ease, but Alex soon discovered that survival was never truly easy. It only changed its shape. The challenge of heat, the first lesson of summer, was the heat itself. Alex had grown used to the cold bite of winter and the damp freshness of spring, but summer's warmth was relentless. The sun burned hot on his skin, and even the simplest tasks, walking, carrying wood, gathering plants, made sweat pour down his face. The Neanderthals knew how to live in this heat. They rose early, working in the cool hours of morning, then rested in shaded shelters during the harshest midday sun. Alex learned to do the same. He discovered how dangerous dehydration could be when the sun was strong. The Neanderthals taught him to drink often, but never too quickly, for gulping cold water after sweating heavily could upset the body. They showed him which leaves could be chewed to keep the mouth moist, and how to find hidden sources of water when streams ran low at night. When the heat finally softened, the air was alive with the sound of crickets and frogs. The campfires burned smaller now, not for warmth, but for cooking and to keep insects away. The warmth of the day lingered in the earth, and Alex found himself lying on the soft grass, looking at the stars with the Neanderthals beside him. He thought often about how different this was from his old life, where air conditioning and running water had made him forget how powerful the sun and the seasons truly were. The forest of plenty food was easier to find in summer, but that did not mean it was handed freely. The Neanderthals taught Alex to identify berries, nuts, and roots. Some plants were sweet and nourishing, others bitter but filling, and some deadly if eaten without knowledge. Alex listened carefully, memorizing the shapes of leaves, the colors of stems, the smell of crushed roots. The group often split into small bands to forage. Alex walked carefully through thickets of bushes, plucking berries with patience, making sure to leave some behind for animals and for future growth. He noticed that for every patch of berries, there were insects waiting to feast, and sometimes bears or boars would also come sniffing around. Summer abundance drew all creatures closer, and the balance of the forest became sharper. Hunting also changed with the season. The prey was healthier, quicker, and harder to catch. Deer darted through the forest with incredible speed, rabbits multiplied in their burrows, and birds filled the skies. Alex practiced his tracking skills, crouching low to study prints in the soil, noting broken twigs and disturbed grass. He learned to follow the faintest trail, moving slowly and quietly, blending his body with the shadows. Fishing became one of the most valuable skills. With sharpened spears, the Neanderthals waded into streams, standing silently as the water rushed around their legs. Alex joined them, holding his breath as he watched the flash of silver beneath the surface. Striking required patience and precision, and at first he missed again and again. But slowly, over days of practice, he began to succeed. The satisfaction of pulling a wriggling fish from the water was immense. Food that was clean, filling, and easier to preserve. Insects, illness, and the small battles summer brought another challenge that Alex had never considered: insects. Mosquitoes swarmed in the warm evenings, buzzing in clouds that bit its skin and left it itching and swollen. Flies gathered around food, and tiny ticks clung to grass, waiting to crawl onto warm bodies. The Neanderthals had long ago learned to fight back with nature's help. They smeared mud on their skin to cool and protect it, rubbed strong-smelling plants to repel insects, and kept fires smoldering so the smoke would drive the pests away. Alex followed their example, at first reluctantly, but soon he understood the wisdom. The smallest creatures could bring the greatest torment, and in a world without medicine, a single infected bite could mean death. The Neanderthals also taught him to recognize signs of sickness. If the stomach turned after eating a certain plant, it was remembered and avoided. If water made someone ill, they purified it more carefully the next time. Alex learned that survival was a constant experiment, guided by memory, observation, and respect. Mistakes were costly, but careful habits kept the group strong. The days of summer had their rhythm. In the morning, the group would rise with the first light. Tasks were divided. Some went to gather berries and roots, others to hunt or fish, others to repair shelters and tools. Alex found himself useful in many small ways. He carried bundles of wood, fetched water, practiced with stone tools, and helped prepare food. He also learned about preserving food. Summer abundance could not be wasted, for winter would return eventually, and it would be harsh again. The Neanderthals dried meat in the sun, smoked fish over low fires, and stored nuts in carefully hidden pits. Alex was amazed by the wisdom of it all. Every season was preparation for the next, at midday. When the sun was hottest, the group rested in the shade of trees or caves. Alex enjoyed these quiet hours, listening to the hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, and the distant calls of birds. Sometimes the Neanderthals dozed, sometimes they told simple stories with gestures and sounds, and sometimes they simply sat together in silence. Alex felt the strength of their bond, a family not built by blood, but by survival. Evening was for sharing. The group gathered by the fire, eating together, passing food from hand to hand, and watching the flames dance. Alex listened to the soft sounds of Neanderthal voices, their laughter deep and rough, their gestures warm. He could not understand every word, but he understood the meaning. They were alive, they were together, and that was enough. Amid the struggles of summer, Alex also found moments of pure wonder. He watched fireflies glow in the darkness, their lights flickering like tiny stars among the trees. He saw an eagle swoop from the sky, catching a fish in its talons with breathtaking precision. He discovered a waterfall deep in the forest, its water crashing down with a power that filled the air with mist and rainbows. These sights reminded Alex why life, even when difficult, was worth living. In the modern world, such wonders had been hidden behind walls, machines, and distractions. Here, they were part of every day. Alex felt small, but he also felt alive. More alive than ever before. As the weeks of summer stretched on, Alex grew stronger, leaner, and more skilled. His hands were rough, his skin darkened by the sun, and his movements quicker and more confident. He was no longer just surviving. He was learning to live, but he also knew that the forest was never fully safe. The Neanderthals reminded him that every season carried danger, and summer was no exception. Heat could kill as easily as cold. Abundance could lead to carelessness. Insects, predators, storms, all were part of the balance of life. By the end of summer, Alex had gained more than strength. He had gained wisdom. He had learned to listen to the forest, to respect its power, to take only what was needed, and to prepare for the future. He had come to see himself not as an outsider, but as a small part of a greater world. And as the days slowly began to shorten, as the first hints of coolness touched the evenings, Alex knew that autumn was coming. Another chapter of survival awaited, with new lessons, new dangers, and new chances to grow. Ah, my dear child, if you thought summer was generous, then autumn is the season when the earth itself seems to breathe out a deep sigh and share the last of its treasures. Alex could feel the change creeping into the forest long before the first leaves fell. The air grew cooler, the mornings misty, and the sun, though still warm, no longer carried the sharp bite of summer heat. The days began to shorten. Shadows stretched longer in the evenings, and the world seemed to glow with softer light. Birds flew in great flocks, gathering together for their long journeys, their cries echoing through the skies. The forest animals became restless, scurrying and digging, storing food, building nests, thickening their coats. Everything was preparing for the long sleep of winter. Alex, too, had to prepare. He had learned much from the Neanderthals, how to hunt, how to fish, how to gather, but now he learned perhaps the most important lesson, that autumn was not only for living, but for storing. For the cold, harsh days would come again, and any mistake now could mean hunger later. The Neanderthals worked tirelessly as the season changed, and Alex followed their lead. They gathered nuts in great baskets of woven branches. Hazelnuts, acorns, chestnuts, each one a treasure that could keep bellies full when the snow fell. Alex learned to crack open the shells, to separate the bitter from the sweet, to roast some for immediate eating and save the rest for later. Berries, too, were gathered, though they ripened and spoiled quickly. The Neanderthals dried them on flat stones warmed by the sun. Alex spread them carefully, turning them over, watching as the juice shrank and the skins toughened. Soon they were light, shriveled things, but they would last through the cold months, providing bursts of sweetness in the bitter winter. Meat was hunted in greater amounts. Deer, boar, and even smaller animals like rabbits were pursued with urgency. Alex learned to smoke meat over slow fires, to hang it high where insects and scavengers could not reach. The smell of smoke clung to everything, the hides, the shelters, even his own skin, but it was the smell of survival. Fish were caught in abundance, dried and stored. Roots were dug from the earth, cleaned, and hidden away in deep pits lined with stones and leaves. Alex realized that autumn was not about enjoying abundance, but about working harder than ever. The Neanderthals carried food back to their camp each day, always thinking ahead to the hunger that winter would bring. The Neanderthals worked tirelessly as the season changed, and Alex followed their lead. They gathered nuts in great baskets of woven branches. Hazelnuts, acorns, chestnuts, each one a treasure that could keep bellies full when the snow fell. Alex learned to crack open the shells, to separate the bitter from the sweet, to roast some for immediate eating and save the rest for later. Berries, too, were gathered, though they ripened and spoiled quickly. The Neanderthals dried them on flat stones warmed by the sun. Alex spread them carefully, turning them over, watching as the juice shrank and the skins toughened. Soon they were light, shriveled things, but they would last through the cold months, providing bursts of sweetness in the bitter winter. Meat was hunted in greater amounts. Deer, boar, and even smaller animals like rabbits were pursued with urgency. Alex learned to smoke meat over slow fires, to hang it high where insects and scavengers could not reach. The smell of smoke clung to everything, the hides, the shelters, even his own skin, but it was the smell of survival. Fish were caught in abundance, dried and stored. Roots were dug from the earth, cleaned, and hidden away in deep pits lined with stones and leaves. Alex realized that autumn was not about enjoying abundance, but about working harder than ever. The Neanderthals carried food back to their camp each day, always thinking ahead to the hunger that winter would bring. Autumn was also the time to prepare more than food. The shelters had to be strengthened against wind and snow. Alex helped gather branches and hides, layering them for warmth. He patched holes, secured roofs, and learned how to angle walls to deflect the bitter winds that would soon arrive. The Neanderthals sharpened their tools, and Alex did the same. He learned to make new spear points, to bind stone to wood with sinew and resin, to shape scraping tools for hides. He practiced striking stone against stone, listening for the right sound, watching for the right spark. Each tool was precious, for in winter, hunting and gathering would be harder, and every mistake more costly. Clothing, too, had to be prepared. The hides of animals were scraped, stretched, and softened. Alex worked beside the Neanderthals, his hands sore from the effort, but his heart proud when he finally produced something useful. He wore a tunic of deer hide, tied with strips of leather, and for the first time he truly felt like he belonged, not just to the group, but to this ancient world. But autumn was not all work, my child. No, there was beauty too, quiet and deep. At night, the stars seemed brighter, sharper, as though the cool air cleared the sky. The moon rose large and pale, shining over the forest and turning the leaves silver. Around the fire, the Neanderthals were at their most peaceful. With food gathered and stored, with the day's work done, they would sit together, humming their low songs, drumming softly on logs, telling stories with gestures and grunts. Alex could not understand every word, but he understood the meaning. They told of hunts long past, of great animals, of storms and trials, of ancestors remembered in voice and fire. Sometimes, Alex would lie back on the ground, listening to the crackle of the flames and the rise and fall of those ancient voices, and he would feel something stir inside him, a sense of connection, of belonging, not only to the Neanderthals, but to the earth itself. Autumn was teaching him not just survival, but gratitude. But autumn, as rich and colorful as it was, did not last forever. Slowly, the winds grew colder. The first snowflake drifted down one morning as Alex gathered wood. It melted on his hand, but its message was clear: winter was coming. The Neanderthals quickened their pace. Food was gathered more urgently. Fires burned longer. The shelters were checked and strengthened once more. Alex worked with all his might, no longer needing to be told what to do. He knew, deep in his bones, what was coming. Autumn had given him knowledge, skill, and strength. It had shown him beauty, abundance, and the importance of preparation. It had taught him to see the signs of the changing world, to respect the wisdom of the animals, to work not only for today, but for tomorrow. And as the last of the golden leaves fell, and the forest grew bare and silent, Alex felt ready. Winter would come, as it always did, with its harshness and trials. But this time, he would face it not as a stranger, but as one who had learned the ways of the earth. And so, my dear one, autumn passed. It was not a season of fear, nor of ease, but of balance. It was a season where the forest gave freely, but also whispered its warning. Take what you can now, for soon the world will sleep. Alex listened to that whisper. He worked, he learned, and he grew. That is the gift of autumn, child. Not just the beauty of the colors, but the wisdom of preparation, of gratitude, and of patience. Alex carried those lessons in his heart, for he knew the hardest days still lay ahead. Ah, child, let me tell you now of the second winter. You remember the first, don't you? Cold, harsh, cruel. It nearly broke Alex, testing him in ways he had never imagined. He had shivered in the dark, his belly empty, his fire dying, the winds tearing at his very bones. He had learned then what it meant to survive, what it meant to endure when every part of the world seemed against him. But the second winter, that was a different story. Not easier, never easier, but different. For this time, Alex was no longer the lost, frightened boy he had been. He was stronger. He was wiser. He had learned the forest's ways, and the Neanderthals had become his teachers, his companions, almost his family. He was not alone now, nor was he as helpless as before. And yet, winter always brings new lessons, child. Lessons you can only learn when the snow falls heavy and the sun hides itself away. It began with silence. Do you know that silence, my dear? The kind that comes when the air grows still and heavy, when the animals quiet themselves, and the forest holds its breath. Alex knew it. He had felt it once before. He looked up one gray morning, and there it was, the first snowflake, drifting slowly from the sky. He held out his hand, caught it, and watched as it melted against his skin. The Neanderthals saw it too, and they moved quickly. They knew what was coming. Food was brought closer to the shelters. Firewood was stacked high. Hides were patched and secured. Alex worked alongside them without being told, his body remembering the panic of last year. He knew they must be ready before the storms came in earnest. By nightfall, the snow was falling thick and fast, covering the ground in white, soft and quiet, but relentless. The forest changed before Alex's very eyes. Paths disappeared. Streams froze. The world shrank to the circle of firelight, and the shadows beyond it grew colder, darker, and more dangerous. The hardest thing about winter, Alex discovered, was not the cold or the hunger, but the darkness. The days grew shorter and shorter until it seemed the sun barely rose before it sank again. The nights stretched on forever, long black tunnels of silence broken only by the crackling of firewood or the distant howl of wolves to fight the darkness. The Neanderthals kept their fires burning. The flames became their sun, their warmth, their protection. Alex took turns tending the fire, feeding it carefully with wood, watching the sparks rise like tiny stars into the smoke. He learned to build it strong enough to last the night, but never so wild that it would consume the wood too quickly. Fire was not just warmth, it was life. Without it, frost would creep into their bones, water would freeze in their skins, and food could not be cooked. Alex respected the fire, tended it with reverence, and guarded the embers even when he slept. Food. Ah yes, that was the second great trial. In summer and autumn, the forest had been generous, its hands full of berries, roots, and animals. But in winter, it was stingy, clutching its treasures tight beneath snow and ice. Hunting grew difficult. Tracks were harder to follow, animals scarcer and faster. Alex joined the Neanderthals on hunts, trudging through deep snow, his breath steaming in the cold. Sometimes they returned with nothing, their bellies rumbling, their hearts heavy. Other times they brought back a rabbit, a fox, or, on rare lucky days, a deer. Each kill was treated with deep respect. Nothing was wasted. Meat was cooked slowly over the fire or cut into strips and dried. Bones were cracked open for their marrow, rich and warming. Hides were scraped and softened, turned into clothing or blankets. Even sinew and fat were used for binding tools or making small lamps. Alex learned to chew slowly, to savor each bite, to be grateful for every scrap of food. He remembered the hunger of his first winter, the gnawing emptiness that had almost broken him, and he vowed never to take food for granted again. Child, do you know how cold can creep into your body like a thief? It sneaks into your fingers and toes first, making them stiff and numb. Then it crawls up your arms and legs, making your muscles ache, your bones shiver. If you are not careful, It will steal your strength, your will, even your life. Alex fought the cold every day. He wrapped himself in layers of hide, tucked his hands into fur, pulled his hood low over his face. He kept moving whenever he could, for standing still was dangerous. He learned tricks from the Neanderthals, warming stones by the fire and placing them near his feet, building small windbreaks to block the icy gusts, lying close with others at night to share body heat. But still, the cold was always there, waiting. Sometimes, when the fire burned low and the night was long, Alex would feel it pressing against him, trying to slip inside. He would wake, teeth chattering, and feed the fire quickly, watching the flames rise as though they were his only shield. The forest in winter is not empty, child. Oh no, it is alive, though in a quieter, sharper way. And among the creatures of winter, none stirred Alex's fear and awe more than the wolves. He heard them often at night, their howls carrying across the frozen hills. Long, mournful, and wild, those cries seemed to come from another world. Sometimes they were far away, other times frighteningly close. The Neanderthals listened carefully, able to tell from the sound whether the wolves were hunting, warning, or calling to one another. One night, Alex saw them. He had gone out to fetch more wood when he spotted shapes in the distance. Dark forms against the snow, moving silently. Their eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. They did not attack, not that night, but they watched. Alex felt their gaze like a weight on his chest. He hurried back to the shelter, the wood clutched tight in his arms, and the Neanderthals sealed the entrance with hides. Wolves, the Neanderthals explained, were both rivals and teachers. They hunted as a pack, clever and patient. To survive the winter, Alex had to learn from them, to move silently, to work with others, to wait for the right moment to strike. In the endless nights of winter, Alex found himself dreaming more often. Some dreams were of his old world, bright lights, warm houses, the hum of machines. But those dreams faded quickly, like smoke in the wind. Other dreams were stranger, deeper. He dreamed of the forest speaking, of animals watching him with human eyes, of the fire whispering secrets. He dreamed of walking among shadows, guided by the Neanderthals' voices, their songs echoing in his heart. Sometimes he woke from these dreams with tears on his face, though he could not say why. Other times he woke with a strange strength, as though the dreams had given him courage. The Neanderthals spoke little of dreams, but Alex sensed they carried meaning, teaching him in ways words could not. Then came the storm that it began with wind, howling, screaming, tearing at the trees. Snow fell in sheets, so thick Alex could barely see his own hands. The Neanderthals huddled in their shelters, fires burning high, hides pulled tight. For 3 days the storm raged, burying the world in white. The shelters shook. The fires struggled against the wind. Food grew short. Alex's heart pounded as he worked to keep the fire alive, to help the Neanderthals patch holes, to fetch snow for water. He thought of his first winter, when he had nearly given up, but this time he did not falter. He worked until his muscles ached, until his eyes stung with smoke and snow. When the storm finally ended, the world was transformed. The forest was buried, silent, the snow piled higher than Alex's shoulders. But the fire still burned, the shelters still stood, and Alex still lived. He felt a pride he had never known before, not pride in himself alone, but in the group, in their strength together.